Hello, I'm Chris Lapados, Anastasiopoulos. This is Man Free World. The tech is going to be out on Tuesdays, what they told me. Anyway, to close that portal, let's see. We're going to speed watch this documentary from the BBC. At least part one of it. Maybe do part two. I don't know. We'll see. Part one kind of gives it a good cover. This is the first guy that kind of invented modern advertising. What was originally called propaganda, public relations, all these euphemisms for lying. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna speed it up to 1.5x as soon as I get the accent.
He hated it. Said he wanted this stuff.
100 years ago, a new theory about human nature was put forward by Sigmund Freud. He had discovered, he said, primitive sexual and aggressive forces hidden deep inside the minds of all human beings. Forces which, if not controlled, led individuals and societies to chaos and destruction. This series is about how those in power have used Freud's theories to try and control the dangerous crowd in an age of mass democracy.
I mean, that's their excuse, right? But if they can control the mass, they're the ones in control of it, so they can say what happens. So this is where the democracy push. That's why democracy, fascism, communism, all the same stuff, always ends up to a small group of people manipulating or using a smart group of people to manipulate a mass group of people. Okay.
At the heart of the story is not just Sigmund Freud, but other members of the Freud family.
Oh, you thought this family would just had one problem for society, for people, for the freedom of mankind? No, there's another one. This guy's even better.
This episode is about Freud's American nephew, Edward Bernays. Bernays is almost completely unknown today, but his influence on the 20th century was nearly as great as his uncle's.
You know, I'm not a big fan of the BBC, but this is when they actually told the truth. When I was still a kid, or this is when this came out. Fair use.
Because Bernays was the first person to take Freud's ideas about human beings and use them to manipulate the masses.
So frail, he can't walk down the stairs. Okay, whatever.
He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires.
That's sick. That's gross. So this is the people say there's no mind control, no MK Ultra. There's not. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. Hooking your unconscious desires, which they've all mapped out. They've only told you about some of them. There's a bunch of them they haven't told you about. But I mean, you can find out about them if you really want to go dig down the dark tunnels of MK Ultra and all that baloney. That was just a small. That's just stuff that they found out in one cabinet. All the papers they destroyed, so they have to let us know all this stuff. They show us in the movies how this stuff works, but they're using our unconscious hormonal desires, and they link it to whatever using these techniques, and it works really good.
Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses.
But they converted it from selling people goods to now selling them ideological systems that made them not question what they're in. George Carlin.
By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today.
So part of the religion of the people involved with this is they do have to tell you and make it readily available what they're doing, because if you go along with it after they tell you in detail how things operate, or enough details so you can figure it out if you really want to know, and you go along with it, or you don't look into it and you go along with it, seeing the results of it, that's kind of on you. They think they can get away with the karma. They can actually they do believe in karma. They believe what goes around comes around, but they also believe that if you volunteer, if you consciously, or basically by not making a choice, by not saying no, by acquiescing, it's ruled through acquiescence. If you don't say no, well, they assume you mean yes. There's no middle line. There is no middle road with these people. You're either gonna force or against us. That's one of their favorite lines. That's surrealism. Or whatever.
Freud's ideas about how the human mind works have now become an accepted part of society, as have psychoanalysts. Every year, the psychotherapist ball is held in a grand palace in Vienna.
I should tell you the thing about the psychotherapist ball.
This is the psychotherapy ball. Psychotherapists come, some advanced patients come, or former patients come, and many other people, friends, but also people from the Viennese society who like to go to a nice, elegant, comfortable ball.
But it was not always so. 100 years ago, Freud's ideas were hated by Viennese society. At that time, Vienna was the centre of a vast empire ruling Central Europe. And to the powerful nobility of the Habsburg court, Freud's ideas were not only embarrassing, but the very idea of examining and analysing one's inner feelings was a threat to their absolute control.
Yeah, so this is the same group. This is the same group of people who they just want to stay on top, and it's not the same group actually, because the groups do change order, you know, with the actual families that are in this sector of society, but the mindset's always the same.
You see, at that time, these people had the power. And of course, you just were not allowed to show your bloody feelings. I mean, you just couldn't. You know, I mean, you couldn't, if you were unhappy. Can you imagine? For instance, you see someone in the country in a castle, you are deeply unhappy, you are a woman. And you couldn't go to your maid and cry on her shoulder. So you couldn't go into the village and complain, you know, about your feelings. I mean, you couldn't, it was like selling yourself to somebody. You just couldn't.
And then they flipped it down, so that's all you talk about. So you're still not a threat.
You know?
They got you coming and going over here.
Because they had to respect you. Now, of course, Freud, you see, put that thought very much into question, because you see, to examine yourself, you would have to put a lot of other things into question, your society, everything what surrounds you. And that wasn't a good thing at that time.
And it's not a good thing now, is it?
Because your self-created empire, to a certain extent, would have fallen into bits much earlier already.
Well, like what's happening now is why we're having these issues. The people in power are losing their power. They don't want to lose their power, so they're going to do everything they can to all the tricks. And, yeah.
What frightened the rulers of the empire even more was Freud's idea that hidden inside all human beings were dangerous instinctual drives. Freud...
Of course. I think we survived this long. That's kind of obvious. We have this things to survive, and we'll do really ugly things. And there's a certain percentage of us that will actually do anything to survive. And that's what those people have kept us alive. Without them, a lot of us wouldn't even be here. So
He had devised a method he called psychoanalysis. By analysing dreams and free association,
there is a reason why the psychopaths exist. And it's not just, oh, if we get rid of them, everything we can find. No, they will have another group that just takes their place. There has to be that survival thing.
he had unearthed, he said, powerful sexual and aggressive forces, which were the remnants of our animal past. Feelings we repressed
Oh, unearthed it? Oh, come on, stop, guy. It's not that deep.
because they were too dangerous.
Freud devised a method for exploring a hidden part of the mind, which we nowadays call the unconscious, which is a part that is totally unknown to our consciousness, that there exists a barrier in all our minds which prevents these hidden and unwelcome impulses of the unconscious from emerging.
Well, only when they need to come out, they need to come out, not all the time, ding dong. These people overcomplicate some just real simple shit, man.
Good night.
In 1914, the Austro-Hungarian Empire led Europe into war. As the horror mounted, Freud saw it as terrible evidence of the truth of his findings. The saddest thing, he wrote, is that this is exactly the way we should have expected people to behave, from our knowledge of psychoanalysis.
Every time they get access to weaponry, the elite that are losing power send their people to fight each other. What are you doing, Freud? You discovered amazing. Stop. This guy.
Governments had unleashed the primitive forces in human beings, and no one seemed to know how to stop them.
Well, if you have a new technology developed that's been on a bullet train since every single war you guys are fighting, they want to escalate and try and win at all costs.
At that time, Freud's young nephew, Edward Bernays, was working as a press agent in America. His main client was the world-famous opera singer Caruso, who was touring the United States. Bernays' parents had emigrated to America 20 years before, but he kept in touch with his uncle and joined him for holidays in the Alps. But Bernays was now about to return to Europe for a very different reason. On the night that Caruso opened in Toledo, Ohio, America announced it was entering the war against Germany and Austria. As a part of the war effort, the US government set up a committee on public information, and Bernays was employed to promote America's war aims in the press. The president, Woodrow Wilson,
It's all the same shit.
had announced that the United States would fight not to restore the old empires, but to bring democracy to all of Europe. And Bernays proved extremely skillful in promoting this idea, both at home and abroad. And at the end of the war, he was asked to accompany the president to the Paris.
Why democracy? Why not the Republican form of Constitutional Republic form with a democratic thing somewhere in there? What? Look at you, democracies. Oh.
Peace conference.
Then, to my surprise, they asked me to go over with Woodrow Wilson to the peace conference. And at the age of 26, I was in Paris for the entire time of the peace conference that was held in the suburb of Paris, and we worked to make the world safe for democracy.
Oh yeah, world safe for democracy. This guy. Okay. Yeah, it's real safe so far, sir.
That was a big slogan.
Wilson's reception in Paris astounded Bernays and the other American propagandists. Their propaganda had portrayed Wilson as a liberator of the people, a man who would create a new world in which the individual would be free. They had made him a hero of the masses.
Which individual? Who free from who? Free to do what? They never talk about that stuff, all these platitudes, and this is the Bernays shit.
And as he watched the crowd surge around Wilson, Bernays began to wonder whether it would be possible to do the same type of mass persuasion, but in peacetime.
When I came back to the United States, I decided that if you could use propaganda for war, you could certainly use it for peace. And propaganda got to be a bad word because of the Germans using it. So what I did was to try to find some other words. So we found the word Council on Public Relations.
Always playing with the words. English seems to be designed for this shenanigans. Dual meanings, words having opposite, same word having opposite meanings. Lots of subtext, lots of generalities.
Bernays returned to New York and set up as a public relations counsel in a small office off Broadway. It was the first time the term had ever been used. Since the end of the 19th century, America had...
I invented it, okay? So what? This guy was super... Once he saw people like, oh, is that a new thing? No, it's lies. It's just lies, man. It's just another word for lies. You hear them, lots of the words for the same stuff. It's like there's some subterfuge going on there. Someone's making some money, or I'm gonna make somebody fight each other. One of the two. Either we're gonna be fighting, or money's changing hands.
Become a mass industrial society, with millions clustered together in the cities. Bernays was determined to find a way to manage and alter the way these new crowds thought and felt. To do this, he turned to the writings of his uncle Sigmund. While in Paris, Bernays had sent his uncle a gift of some Havana cigars. In return, Freud had sent him a copy of his general introduction to psychoanalysis. Bernays read it, and the picture of hidden irrational forces inside human beings fascinated him. He wondered whether he might make money by manipulating the unconscious.
Yes. Yes, of course you can. These people, yeah, if you lie to people, and then you make it seem like everyone else is believing it, and it's hooked to some emotional yes. Oh my God, what the hell? This is not groundbreaking.
What Eddie got from Freud.
This is just scam artist, con artist bullshit.
Was indeed this idea that there is a lot more going on in human decision making, not only among individuals, but even more importantly among groups, than this idea that information drives behavior. And so Eddie began to formulate this idea.
Yeah, if you manipulate people with that, yeah, of course. Come on.
That you had to look at things that would play to people's irrational emotions. And you see, that moved Eddie.
It's not irrational. The emotions are not irrational, sir. They just have a different intelligence. And this is where these academics go off the fucking rails. First of all, when they're trying to do the conscious unconscious, it's all one thing. We're experiencing it. When we have a feeling, that's our unconscious mind. We have us like, I don't know, that's our unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind. Stop. We're all one organism. There's no Cartesian split. The reason why exercise improves depression is because our brain is our body. Come on, stop.
Immediately into a different category from other people in his field and most government officials and managers of the day who thought if you just hit people with all this factual information, they would look at that and say, oh, of course. And Eddie knew that.
Yeah, and in the absence of being fucked with emotionally, yeah. I mean, usually that's kind of how people, people that are responsible, yeah. People aren't being fucked with and trying to milk dry, and we need to get some more excess profits out of them or send them over to kill that motherfucker over there so we can stay in power for another 10 years.
It was not the way the world worked.
Bernays set out to experiment.
Yes, we all make emotional decisions, correct. This is always emotional, and we do backwards rationalization. But there are people who are responsible who will look at the data and go for it. But if you scare the shit out of them, yeah, guess what? They're going to ignore the data. What is this? Come on, I can't read the instructions. If someone's about to shoot me, I'm not going to read the instructions.
With the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke.
What they've done to what these people have done to humanity, they put them up on a pedestal like they were so wonderful, is horrific. Is horrific.
At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it.
He said, we're losing half of our market because men have invoked a taboo against women smoking in public. Can you do anything about that? I said, let me think about it. And then I said, have I your permission to see a psychoanalyst to find out what cigarettes mean to women? He said, what'll it cost? So I called up Dr. Brill, A.A. Brill, who was a leading psychoanalyst in New York at that time.
How come you didn't call your uncle? Why didn't you call your uncle?
Because he was in Vienna.
A.A. Brill was one of the first psychoanalysts in America, and for a large fee, he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power. He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power, then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises.
Okay, well, I don't know about all that. I know that the women wanted to be. There was a class of women at the time. There was a section of women that wanted to have more freedom because the whole world was talking about freedom all the time, Libertad. So, but attaching sex to the sex of the women being young and beautiful looking, they weren't old and they weren't random women. They were young, sexy looking women. So he was using sex, not this unconscious drive of the male penis. No, it was just sex, ding dong. Goddamn. Why do you have to overcomplicate it?
Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came, and Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest.
Yeah, where's all the old ladies? Where's all the mothers and aunts? No, it's young women who are at the peak of everyone's desirability, so he's using sex. It's silly.
By lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this
So
moment.
he's using the same cries that he did for the war. He just said what he's going to do. He's going to use the thing to use this on cigarettes. He was wondering if he could use it. So he's using an addictive substance. It was easy to, if once people get started and they think it's cooler, cool looking or sexier, gives them a one up for the getting up inside the class or giving them more freedom. Silly.
And so he was ready with a phrase, which was torches of freedom.
Yeah, because he was just doing the war effort. He was just paid. The war effort was like, wow, that works really fucking good. It was like really super simple and easy. Now I'm going to use it for this. It's like, wow, what a genius. Wow, this guy's a scumbag. He's just a con artist.
And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch, you see? And so all of this is there together. There's emotion, there's memory, there's a rational phrase, even though it's using a lot of emotional elements. It's a phrase that works in a rational sense. All of this is together. And so the next day, this was not just in all of the New York papers, it was across the United States and around the world. And from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic act.
Well, I mean, there was a lot going on at the time as well. Let's not mince. I mean, there's a good deal of luck. It was likely that someone was gonna do this eventually. like not that hard to figure out this stuff. And with the age of mass media and a very let's say impressionable public who kind of believed a lot of the things they saw and didn't understand, almost like today, that you're being sold with all over the place by people who don't give two shits about you. Holy crap, man.
What Bernays had created was the idea that if a woman smoked, it made her more powerful and independent, an idea that still persists today.
Embrace me, my sweet embrace.
It made him realize that it was possible to persuade people to behave irrationally if you link products to their emotional desires and feelings. The idea that smoking actually made women freer was completely irrational, but it made them feel more independent. It meant that irrelevant objects could become powerful emotional symbols of how you wanted to be seen by others.
Eddie Bernays saw the way to sell product was not to sell it to your intellect, that you ought to buy an automobile, but that you will feel better about it if you have this automobile. I think he...
And people were so miserable that they just, oh, I can feel better? Oh, I can look better? I can do something like a shortcut? You tell me there's a shortcut? I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do any work or anything of value to get something of value, and you're only gonna, all I have to do is puff on an addictive substance? Oh, okay. Humans, man. We're so easy.
He originated that idea, that they weren't just purchasing something, but they were engaging themselves, emotionally or personally, in the product or service. That it's not, you think you need a new piece of clothing, but you'll feel better with the piece of clothing. That was his contribution in a very real sense. We see it all over the place today, but I think he...
That was his scam. That was his scam. Contribution, sir? He lied to people. That's not a contribution. He messed with people's heads. He made them get addicted to stuff that killed them. Where's this guy?
He originated the idea of the emotional connect to a product or service.
What Bernays was doing fascinated America's corporations.
Oh, well,
They had come out of the
sure.
war rich and powerful, but they had a growing worry. The system of mass production had flourished during the war, and now millions of goods were pouring off production lines. What they were frightened of was the danger of overproduction, that there would come a point when people had enough goods and would simply stop buying.
See, it's not about actually these people. You can't stop them. You have to put some kind of brakes on. I don't know how to stop this. It seems to gotta go all the way to the end. Always has to seem to go all the way to the end.
Up until that point, the majority of products were still sold to the masses on the basis of need. While the rich had long been used to luxury goods, for the millions of working-class Americans, most products were still advertised as necessities.
Right. So all the benefits of the Industrial Revolution were starting to catch up. So everyone that needed stuff just kind of had stuff at this point. And all the people were like, holy shit, all the corporate execs were like, oh no, we're about to go out of business, or just need that marginal supply, and don't make anything better, just produce what's already had. So that's why the communist thing came along. It's like, oh, you guys are just making the same shit all over the place. Why don't we just make that stuff and cuts you out? And that was the plan there. They're gonna cut the leadership out because they're just gonna make light bulbs that are the same light bulb that they made for the last 25 years. I mean, who cares? You're not really adding anything. So, and this is where the capitalists, they're just like, hey, why? So instead of like, hey, improving things or going on to something else or just planned obsolescence. Make big everything trendy, have some style on it that needs to change every 2 years.
Necessities. Goods like shoes, stockings, even cars were promoted in functional terms for their durability.
And the promise is that if you get this, you'll be happy, right? That's the other thing. And you get it, and you are happy for about 2.3 seconds when you get that dopamine hit, when you open the box, and blah, blah, blah. And then you're back to being,
The advertisements were simply to show people the product's practical virtues, nothing more. What the corporations realized they had to do was transform the way the majority of Americans thought about products. One leading Wall Street banker, Paul Mazur of Lehman Brothers, was clear about what was necessary. We must shift America, he wrote, from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality.
So the training is this MK Ultra. I'm always going on and on about that. The training of you to have this endless materialistic mindset was installed on purpose to keep these guys in business when they really probably should try and do something better with their lives or improve things or actually reduce the cost of things to zero so we We can do something else. I don't know. It's this guy's
mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs.
Prior to that time, there was no American consumer. There was the American worker, and there was the American owner, and they manufactured and they saved and they ate what they had to, and the people shopped for what they needed. And while the very rich may have bought things they didn't need, most people did not. And Mazur envisioned a break with that, where you would have things that you didn't actually need, but
right, because the production, because these machines were getting so efficient at producing things that everybody had everything they needed. So the sales were starting to slump because people were going, well, I already got the you guys already got it. It works great. They're like, oh no. So they go to this guys. So they had to do the planned obsolescence. They had to do the trendiness and the stylistic stuff and the advertising,
as opposed to needed.
And the man who would be at the center of changing that mentality.
And when are people like, why is this culture not supporting my mental health? Because of this shit.
The corporations was Edward Bernays.
Bernays really.
And we're so, as Americans, we grow up in this crap and we have no idea this is actually what's going on, and nobody says anything about it because they're like, don't say anything, just let them keep buying the shit they don't need.
He is the guy within the United States more than anybody else who sort of brings to the table psychological theory as something that is an essential part of how, from the corporate side, of how we are going to appeal to the masses effectively. And the whole sort of merchandising establishment and sales establishment is ready for Sigmund Freud. I mean, they are ready for understanding what motivates the human mind. And so that there's this real openness to Bernays' techniques being used to sell products to the masses.
Beginning in the early 20s, the New York banks funded the creation of chains of department stores across America. They were to be the outlets for the mass-produced goods, and Bernays' job was to produce the new type of customer. Bernays began to create many of the techniques of mass consumer persuasion that we now live with. He was employed by William Randolph Hearst to promote his new women's magazines.
Oh, that guy. Woo! You want to talk about where the newspapers got all their ideas from the mass mind control. There's your #1 star.
And Bernays glamorized them by placing articles and advertisements that linked products made by others of his clients to famous film stars like Clara Bow, who was...
This isn't the modern Instagram. This is all it is. If you didn't know that, like 80% of the stuff that you see on Instagram is the same stuff. Hello? Mental health. I got all the things in my mental health.
Was also his client. Bernays also began the practice of product placement in the movies. And he dressed the stars at the film's
product placement, that's all Instagram.
Premieres with clothes and jewelry from other firms he represented. He was, he claimed, the first person to tell car companies they could sell cars as symbols of male sexuality. He employed psychologists to issue reports that said products were good for you, and then pretended they were independent studies.
Nothing like they've done today. These guys have been doing it forever. This is your great grandparents. They've got such a fucking knucklehead. They got in a headlock like, say Uncle Sam.
He organised fashion shows in department stores and paid celebrities to repeat the new and essential message. You bought things not just for need, but to express your inner sense of yourself to others.
No, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
There's a psychology of dress. Have you ever thought about it? How it can express your character? You all have interesting characters, but some of them are all hidden.
And she was paid $100 to say the line. Say the line, aviator lady. Say the line.
Wonder why you all want to dress always the same, with the same hats and the same coats. I'm sure all of you are interesting and have wonderful things about you, but looking at you in the street, you all look so much the same. And that's why I'm talking to you about the psychology of dress. Try and express yourselves better in your dress.
What about the astrology, huh? What about what about that?
Bring out certain things that you think are hidden. I wonder if you've thought of this angle of your personality.
I'd like to ask you some questions.
Why are you suckers? We're so love-starved and being traumatized in this crazy-ass society. I mean, most people totally like fucked up, love-starved, and just like desperate for attention to be seen. And these guys are just preying on it. Evil. I don't know how much closer to evil you would need, but it's pretty fucking spot on.
Like short skirts.
Oh, because there's more to see.
More to see, eh? What good does that do you?
What's my answer? It makes you more attractive.
It does?
In 1927, an American journalist wrote, "A change has come over our democracy. It is called consumptionism. The American citizen's first importance to his country is now no longer that of citizen, but that of consumer."
So that stuff that the George Bush talks about started way, way before he was even born.
The growing wave of consumerism helped in turn to create a stock market boom. And yet again, Edward Bernays became involved, promoting the novel idea that ordinary people should buy shares, borrowing money from banks he also represented.
If you don't know about the Great Taking yet, you should really understand what they let people know about it, but they're not really shareholders. We wouldn't let anybody know such low stature actually own stocks. They are held and not trusted. Don't worry, you'll get your money if we feel like it.
And yet again, millions followed his advice.
He was uniquely knowledgeable about how people in large numbers are going to react to products and ideas and so on. But in political terms, if he were to go outside, I can't imagine that he could get 3 people to stand and listen. Wasn't particularly articulate, was a kind of funny looking, and didn't have any sense of reaching out for people one-on-one.
Yeah, he was a heartless, autistic nerd who knew that had mapped the mind, or got the map, the secret map that they haven't told anybody about, but it's pretty obvious what it is. Not real hard to figure out. And he's a nerd, autistic nerd, and he was also talking to these other autistic, psychopathic nerds, so he's on the same level because he's a psychopath. He's a heartless bastard. He doesn't care. He don't give a fuck. And we think it's great. And we think we still, these corporate guys that run the show think it's just the way things are. It's like, no, this is terrible. This is abusive. And it's probably going to come to an end at some point here in a minute. I don't know. Who knows? It could go on for 100 years. Who knows?
None at all. He didn't think about people in groups of one. Thought about people in groups of thousands.
Psychopath.
I would have nothing to do with it. Hello?
Bernays soon became famous as the man who understood the mind of the crowd. And in 1924, the president
Master con man, okay.
Contacted him. President Coolidge was a quiet, taciturn man and had become a national joke. The press portrayed him as a dull, humorless figure. Bernays' solution was to do exactly the same as he had done with products. He persuaded 34 famous film stars to visit the White House. And for the first time, politics became involved with public relations.
See, this the original Black Scrying Mirror movie stuff. They were starting the mind control experiments right away. As soon as they got the technology, mind control experiments to mass for political control.
And I lined up these 34 people, and I say, "What's your name?" He say, "Al Jolson." I say, "Mr. President, Al Jolson." Next day, every newspaper in the United States had a front page story. President Coolidge entertains actors at White House.
Yeah, like it's not all set up. Come on. They were doing all this. They got this stuff perfected back then when your grandparents were alive. Your great-grandparents.
And the Times.
And when you think they're not doing it today, you don't think they're not doing it.
And a headline which said, "President nearly laughed." And everybody was happy.
Yeah, nice. Pull one over
While
on you.
Bernays became rich and powerful in America,
Live.
in Vienna, his
It's
uncle
like,
was facing disaster.
Okay, so this thing here, that right there is called Duper's Delight. You can look it up. It's a psychological term. He just got away with lying, and he's just so happy about it. Like, that's one of my best ones. You all fools fell for it. I don't have one friend, but I have lots of people who work for me, and you all are terrible. I got whatever.
And everybody was happy.
Yeah, you're pals, but everybody else
While
in the
Bernays
world
became rich and powerful in
suffers.
America, in Vienna, his uncle was facing disaster. Like much of Europe, Vienna was suffering an economic crisis and massive inflation, which wiped out all of Freud's savings. Facing bankruptcy, he wrote to his nephew for help. Bernays responded by arranging for Freud's works to be published for the first time in America, and began to send his uncle precious dollars, which Freud kept secretly in a foreign bank account.
Yeah, they don't do that today, no.
He was Freud's agent, if you will, to get his books published. Well, of course, once the books were being published, Eddie couldn't help himself but to promote these books, see that everybody read them, make them controversial, emphasize the fact that, do you know what Freud says about sex and what he says cigarettes are a symbol of and so on and so forth? How do you suppose all those stories got out? Certainly the academics weren't spreading these around the country. Eddie Bernays was.
Now we know. It wasn't academic shit. It was his little nephew trying to get a buck out of his dad, his uncle. This is why we have psychology and all. This is so sad. This is so sad when you find out where this shit came from.
Then, when Freud became accepted, well then, of course, to go to a client and say, well, Uncle Siggy, see, then that had some cachet. But notice there, first Eddie created Uncle Siggy in the U.S., made him acceptable, secondly, and thirdly, then capitalized on Uncle Siggy. Typical Bernays performance.
Bernays also suggested
Right, so we think that this stuff is real. We base our whole industries on this stuff, psychiatry, just a bunch of tranquilizers. And psychology is all these weird things that don't even real. It's totally promoted by a guy that's a total master card honors grifter.
that Freud promote himself in the United States. He proposed his uncle write an article for Cosmopolitan.
Everybody knows Americans are the biggest suckers, by the way. This is why these guys came over here just like, we're going to just suck with these guys. They'll fall for anything. Tell them it'll make them happy, or tell them it'll make them popular, or tell them it'll make them pretty, and then they'll buy whatever. They'll do whatever. They won't even argue. They won't complain. They'll think it's
The
their
magazine that
fault.
Bernays represented, entitled A Woman's Mental Place in the Home. Freud was furious. Such an idea, he said, was unthinkable. It was vulgar, and anyway, he hated America.
Yeah, so okay, there we go. He hates America. Why did he hate America? Huh. He's living over there in Vienna, all stuck in the mud, stuck in the butts, but he hates America. Okay, whatever.
Freud was now becoming increasingly pessimistic about
But everybody in America is taking on this guy that hates us. Oh, okay. That's real great. It's typical American shit anyway, but like to hate ourselves by some German guy telling us, you should hate yourself. No, you hate yourself, dude. Why do you want to have sex with your mom? Why do you keep bringing that up? Why do you do so much coke, dude?
beings. In the mid-20s, he retreated in the summers to the Alps, sometimes staying in an old hotel, the Pension Moritz in Berchtesgaden. It is now a ruin. Freud began to write about group behavior, about how easily the unconscious aggressive forces in human beings could be triggered when they were in crowds. Freud believed he had underestimated
These guys, oh, this is why it's when you're in crowds, people are emotional. This is nothing. This is breakthrough. Really? They were doing crowd work back in the Roman times. What are you talking about, dude? This guy.
the aggressive instincts in human beings. They were far more dangerous than he had originally thought.
After World War I, Freud was basically a pessimist. He felt that man is an impossible creature, a very, very sadistic and bad species.
No, that's him. That's him and his family. He's the bad. He's very, very sadistic. He's the bad species. I'm not part of his family. I don't believe what he believes. He believes some weird, crazy, wacko shit, drug addict shit. And no, he's a sadistic bastard. His family's sadistic. His nephew is sadistic, sir.
And did not believe that man can
Freud's just telling on himself. He's projecting.
be improved. Man is a ferocious animal, the most ferocious animal that exists.
Well, if psychopaths are allowed to get access to new technologies that gives them even a slight edge and they think they can gain power or get retribution, guess what they're going to do? This is human thing, man. We're a tournament species. Winner takes all. They were all victims of the R.A. Raisin. This guy, what are these people? I don't know, man. People listening to this crap?
Enjoy torturing and killing and
Yeah, his group, his crowd, the people he hangs out with. Yeah, they're all about it.
he didn't like man.
Well, the men, if you're talking about the class that he's hanging out with, yeah, they're terrible. What are you talking about? Is city dwellings in Vienna at that time? Who would like those people? Those people are terrible.
The publication of Freud's works in America had an extraordinary effect on journalists and intellectuals in the 1920s. What fascinated and frightened them was the picture Freud painted of submerged, dangerous forces lurking just under the surface of modern society. Forces that could erupt easily to produce the frenzied mob which had the power to destroy even governments.
Well, I mean, this is nothing new, sir. This is human history. What are you talking about?
It was this they believed had happened in Russia.
No, they had a technological revolution happening, and the people thought they could do it better, differently. And the ruling class was super corrupt, and this just happens every once in a while. This is nothing strange. It was just happened during his period, so it makes it seem like it was so special. This shit's been happening the whole time. Goddamn.
To many, this meant that one of the guiding principles of mass democracy was wrong. The belief that human beings could be trusted to make decisions on a rational basis.
Whoever said that? Whoever said that? That's mistaken right there. What are you talking about?
The leading political writer, Walter Lippmann, argued that if human beings were in reality driven by unconscious, irrational forces, then it was necessary to rethink democracy. What was needed was a new elite who could manage what he called the bewildered herd. This would be
well, the herd has become bewildered. And also, this may actually be human nature, and there's just no way around it. We got to have somebody running the police, and we just hope they can not be corrupt for a while, and maybe we can move ahead a little bit until they eventually become corrupt, and we fall back. So it's 2 steps ahead, 1 step back. 1 step ahead, 2 steps back.
done through psychological techniques that would control the unconscious feelings of the masses.
So here you have Walter Lippmann, probably the most influential political thinker in the United States, who is essentially saying that the basic mechanism of the mass mind is unreason, is irrationality, is...
It's emotion that can be manipulated. Yeah, we're hormonal creatures. What are you talking about? The intellect is like a little rider on an elephant. What are you talking about, dude? This is groundbreaking. Wow.
Animality. He believes that the mob in the street, which is how he sees ordinary people, are people who are driven not by their minds but by their...
Ordinary people, which he is not one of. He is some rarefied human. No, he's a piece of shit.
Spinal cords. The notion of kind of animal drives, unconscious instinct.
Yeah, that's him. He has animal drives, instinctual, blah, blah, blah. That's him. He's telling on himself. He's an animal. He can't get over himself.
Instinctual drives lurking beneath the surface of civilization.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of people who have all kinds of trauma from living in a society full of these fucks and going off to war every 4 seconds and go and fight each other for weird reasons that don't make no sense. Just cause, and if you don't, I'm going to shoot you in the back of the head. Yeah, that might leave a little scar or mark and make a group of people maybe a little emotional, maybe a little reactive, ding dong.
And so they started looking towards psychological science as a way of understanding the mechanisms by which the popular mind works, specifically...
Popular mind, it's just people, man. We all run. If you scare the shit out of people, they're gonna do whatever you tell them. This is not hard. This is the breakthrough.
With the goal of figuring out how to understand how to apply those mechanisms to strategies for social control.
Mind control. MK Ultra. This is what he's talking about. MK Ultra. Standard shit. There's all kinds of ways. Most of it's done electronically, coming through those black mirrors with pretty faces, talking real pretty. And most people, they don't need to get everybody. They don't have to get all. They don't need to get most. They just have to get over 60%, which, the rate was about 70%. So it just lets you know that, hey, man, most people fall for this. It's not hard. And they don't care if they don't get everybody. They don't care. They don't need everybody. All they need is the majority, the democracy.
Edward Bernays was fascinated by Lippmann's arguments, and also saw a way to promote himself by using them.
Oh, wow, shocker there. I wouldn't have saw that coming. Bernays, he's been so selfless so far.
In the 1920s, he began to write a series of books which argued that he had developed the very techniques Lippmann was calling for. By stimulating people's inner desires and then sating them with consumer products, he was creating a new way to manage the irrational force of the masses.
You mean lying to people? Telling them about stuff that's not real? Running Ponzi schemes? Standard Ponzi. This is standard con man Ponzi scheme with talking points.
He called it the engineering of consent.
There we go. You think they haven't mastered it? You think the people that control this thing think that they got a good handle on the sucker? I mean, they do. They don't have everybody. They don't need everybody. They don't even care about getting everybody. They just need the most of them. And they got
Democracy,
them.
to my father, was a wonderful concept. But I don't think he felt that all those publics out there had reliable judgment. And not that they...
For who? These people. Reliable judgment for who? For themselves? Make proper decisions how to run their lives as free humans with dignity and respect, or pawns on a chessboard moved around in games of control. Games of control and power and domination of the world.
That they very easily might vote for the wrong man. Or...
They were talking about that back then. You don't think that this whole thing's been done? We have no idea what's actually going on. We have no idea.
Want the wrong thing, so that they had to be guided from above. It's enlightened despotism in a sense. You appeal to their...
Enlightened despotism. These words are just so amazing for talking about enslaving populations of people and making them bend their will to things that aren't really the best interest for them, but just these guys, these fucking really guys.
Desires and their
Amazing.
unrecognized longings, that sort of thing.
Bravo, guys.
That you can tap into their deepest desires or their deepest fears and use that to your own purposes.
And then, in 1928, a president came to power who agreed with Bernays.
Hey, hey boys, smoke him if you got him.
President Hoover was the first politician to articulate the idea that consumerism had become the central motor of American life. After his election, he told a group of advertisers and public relations men, "You have taken over the job of creating desire and have transformed people into constantly moving happiness machines."
Constantly moving happiness machines. Oh, is that what we are? Oh, neat.
Machines which have become the key to economic progress.
Get to work, cog in the machine, economic happiness machine.
What was beginning to emerge in the 1920s was a new idea of how to run mass democracy. At its heart was the consuming self, which not only made the economy work, but was happy and docile, and so created a stable society.
And there we go. There's where your psychiatry comes in, with all your keeping you docile, with all the Lexapro and the Wellbutrin and the alcohol and cigarettes and whatever else, TV, wrestling, golf, NFL, college.
Both Bernays and Littman's concept of managing the masses takes the idea of democracy and it turns it into a palliative. It turns it into giving people some kind of feel-good medication that will respond to an immediate pain or immediate yearning. But
Right. That's all it is. It is a tranquilizer to make you not realize what actually is going on, which is you're not free. You're a fucking slave, and you're using slave money, and they do actually let you. You can leave. They do let you go, but they don't make it easy, and they don't make it easy to find the exits unless you got a lot of money. And if you got a lot of money, then you're kind of already in the game, and you're on the team. So
will not alter the objective circumstances one iota. I mean, democracy really, the idea of democracy at its heart was about changing the relations of power that had governed the world for so long. And Bernays' concept of democracy was one of maintaining relations of power, even if it meant that one needed to sort of stimulate the psychological lives of the public.
Stimulate the psychological lives of the public. Lies. So you just lie to them. So you really need to lie to them a lot and make them believe things that aren't true. And that's the way to control them. And by the time they figure it out, they're old enough where don't give a fucking want to do anything about it. So there you go.
And in fact, in his mind, that was what was necessary. That if you can keep stimulating the irrational self, then leadership can basically go on doing what it wants to do.
There it goes. That's it. He just lets it slip right there. If you can make people irrational, leadership can just go on and do whatever the fuck it wants. And what are you going to do about it?
Bernays now became one of the central figures in a business elite that dominated American society and politics in the 1920s. He also became extremely rich and lived in a suite of rooms in one of New York's most expensive hotels, where he gave frequent parties.
Oh my goodness. He had a home in the corner suite of the Sherry Netherland Hotel. And here's this wonderful suite with all these windows looking out on Central Park and across at the plaza and on the square. And he would use this place to hold a soiree. The mayor...
This pure psychopathic Ponzi scheme, this guy.
Here would come. All the media leaders would come, the political leaders, the business leaders, the people in the arts. I mean, it was a who's who. People wanted to know Eddie Bernays because, you know, he himself became a sort of a famous man, a sort of a magician who could make these things happen.
A magician, a con man, a liar, someone who is extracting the goodwill and good feelings and patriotism of the people at that time. He monetized it, extracted it, made it profitable, and then turned around and enslaved people with it. Yeah, nice guy.
He knows everybody. He knows the mayor, and he knows the senator, and he calls politicians.
You know, I think if you wanted a portrait of the Dark Lord, this is probably pretty close to what he would look like. This guy makes the Faustian bargains, man, and he monetized the goodwill and patriotism for his own benefit, and he's like, "Fuck you." And if you can't figure it out, it's on you, brother.
Telephone, as if he did get literally a high or a bang out of doing what he did. And that's fine. But
course.
It can be a little hard on the people around.
Psychopath. Of course he was getting high off it. Yeah, you saw his face when he was smiling at the dupers. Right? Yeah, that's what they do. He didn't care about the money. He didn't care about the fame or anything. He just wanted the power, just and wield it.
Especially when you make other people feel stupid.
Yeah, so that's he's pure psychopath. And people really still think this guy was great. They really do. And his dad, they think his uncle's great. And they think his family's fine. No, these people are criminals.
People who worked for him were stupid.
These people are psychopaths. You need to stop listening to them.
Children were stupid, and if people did things in a way that he wouldn't have done them.
Right, because he's a fucking psychopath. And that was one of his techniques to control people, ding dong. Lady, this is one of his control techniques. Oh my goodness, it's just...
They were stupid. It was a...
This is an adult-sized... This is an adult-sized child.
Word that he used over and over and over. Dope and stupid.
Wow. So he really... This is just more absolute evidence, proof that this guy was almost one of the most pure psychopaths I've actually encountered.
And the masses?
They were stupid.
The masses are stupid. So yeah, so this is the person you follow. He thinks you're stupid. His uncle hates you. They're fraud. They're fraudulent. And I don't know why you guys keep listening to any of this stuff or think it's real at all. It's really sad. It's really sad. I've shown this video to people. They don't connect it. So I'm doing this video so you can connect it together. I'm going to leave a link in the description. You can look at it later. But putting 2 and 2 together, because it seems like people have a real hard time putting the 2 and 2 together of who's running the system and your place in it. And if you defend it, this is what you're defending. It's time to leave.
But Bernays' power was about to be destroyed dramatically, and by a type of human irrationality he could do nothing to control. At the end of October 1929, Bernays organised a huge national event to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the invention of the light bulb. President Hoover, the leaders of major corporations, and bankers like John D. Rockefeller were all summoned by Bernays to celebrate the power of American
Why wouldn't they?
business. But even as
American business, these guys are not really doing business. They're doing shenanigans. They're doing power plays, just like everybody else around the world.
they gathered, news came through that shares on the New York Stock Exchange were beginning to fall.
It's the best mind control. That's what they got.
Catastrophically. Throughout the 1920s, speculators had borrowed billions of dollars. The banks had promoted the idea that this was a new era, where market crashes were a thing of the past.
They say that all the time. They say that every cycle. This is like their mantra. It's crazy. So they run these Ponzi schemes, and out the back, they steal everybody's wealth. And they constantly do it over and over. The Great Taking, if you don't know what that is, thegreattaking.com. It's best to find out about it before it's too late.
But they were wrong. What was about to happen was the biggest stock market crash in history. Investors had panicked and begun to sell in a blind, relentless fury that no reassurance by bankers or politicians could halt.
It's all on purpose. If you go look into this stuff, it was all done on purpose to install the Federal Reserve System that allows them to do permanent Ponzi scheme forever. Which looks like this one might be unwinding, but I don't know. They could go. What's 143 trillion now in debt? A real debt, the actual true debt, 143 trillion, and it's going up $2 trillion in interest every year. Okay, the GDP is only like 4 trillion or something.
And on the 29th of October 1929, the market collapsed.
So that means that the poor people are extremely poor, middle class completely gutted, and the top elite they think that they own everything. They don't own shit. They think they can keep going with this forever. Maybe they can. But they did have 1,000 years of the Dark Ages after the same stuff happened in Rome. So this is really interesting.
The effect of the crash on the American economy was disastrous. Faced with recession and unemployment, millions of American workers stopped buying goods they didn't need. The consumer boom that Bernays had done so much to engineer disappeared, and he, in the profession of public relations, fell from favour. Bernays' brief moment of power seemed to be over.
Oh, no. No. Far from it.
The effect of the Wall Street crash on Europe was also catastrophic. It intensified the growing economic and political crisis in the new democracies. In both Germany and Austria, there were violent street battles between the armed wings of different political parties.
They were set up to fail anyway. For
Against
the
this
same
backdrop,
reasons.
Freud, who was suffering from cancer of the jaw, retreated yet again to the Alps.
Revenge, counter-revenge.
He wrote a book called Civilization and its Discontents. It was a powerful attack on the idea that civilization was an expression of human progress.
People are nasty.
Instead, Freud argued, civilization had actually been constructed to control the dangerous animal forces inside human beings. What was implicit in Freud's argument was that the ideal of individual freedom, which was at the heart of democracy, was impossible. Human beings could never be allowed to truly express themselves because it was too dangerous.
For who? For these control freaks, you better believe it's super dangerous for them, because every once in a while things go super sideways and in Minecraft, and they can't hide. So
they must always be controlled and would thus always be discontent.
There you go. Yeah, that's it.
Man doesn't want to be civilized, and he is civilization brings discontent, but it's necessary to survive. Otherwise, he couldn't survive. So he must be discontent, because this would be the only way to keep him within limits.
So keeping people sad and poked, like, sad. That's the only way to keep them under control, is put a hard lid on them. Welcome to America.
What did Freud think about the idea of the equality of man?
He didn't believe in it.
He didn't believe in the equality of man. Yeah, these people are animals. They think you're an animal, but they're the ones that are the actual animals. But they think you're an animal. But they're the other ones that are animals. They're the ones that are less than human.
We had 32 parties, and Hitler said, before those parties don't vanish, there is no Germany. That's true. You can't have 32 parties. And so they felt, this one person will put an end to this comedy.
Freud was not alone in his pessimism. Politicians like Adolf Hitler emerged from a growing despair in the 1920s about democracy. The Nazis were convinced that democracy was dangerous because it unleashed a selfish individualism, but didn't have the means to control it. Hitler's party, the National Socialists,
I mean, it's all the same shit.
stood in elections, promising in their propaganda.
Yes, on there's in practice democracy, and then on paper democracy, right? On paper, you can punch all kinds of straw man through all these different systems, but in the end, it's just a small elite people who gain power somehow, and then they wield that power over a middle management to control the masses. It's the same shit. Fascism, socialism, democracy, all of them are the same bullshit. It doesn't matter what the label is. It always ends up with the same structure. There's a guy or two at the top, usually somebody behind the scenes somewhere, and then the public leader, and then the public leadership, and then a massless, faceless middle who take the orders out into the control the entire group. That's really all it is.
They would abandon democracy because of the chaos and unemployment it led to.
Die Parteien versprachen den Himmel auf Erden.
In March 1933, the National Socialists were elected to power in Germany, and they set out to create a society that would control human beings in a different way. One of their first acts was to take control of business. The planning of production would in future be done by the state. The free market was too unstable, as the crash in America had proved.
And that's the same thing they were trying to do with the Federal Reserve and the managerial class they installed with the FDR. It was this idea like, oh, we can scientifically figure it out, but we gotta fucking crush the will of the people, and then we'll take over management scientifically, and we'll figure it. And the Soviet system was more fascistic style, and the United States system was more capitalist style.
Workers' leisure time was also planned by the state through a new organization.
How they can extract the maximum amount from people, stay in power, and fend off the other side.
Organization called Strength Through Joy. One of its mottos was service, not self. But the Nazis did not see this as a return to an old form of autocratic control. It was a new alternative to democracy, in which the feelings and the desires of the masses would still be central, but they would be channeled in such a way as to bind the nation together. The chief exponent of this was Joseph Goebbels, the Minister of Propaganda.
Es mag gut sein, Macht zu
which he got a lot of his ideas from Bernays, by the way.
besitzen, die auf Gewehren ruht. Besser aber und beglückender ist es, das Herz eines Volkes zu gewinnen und es auch zu behalten.
Goebbels organised huge rallies whose function, he said, was to forge the mind of the nation into a unity of thinking, feeling, and desire. One of his inspirations, he told an American journalist, was the writings of Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays.
Yeah, I told you, there he goes. Mass mind control, emotional, fucking with people's emotions, lying to them, telling them something that if they do this thing, they'll be this other thing that they really want, because they're so traumatized from being in the system with these people in control, they'll believe whatever. Make it stop.
In his work on psychology, Freud described how the frightening irrationality inside human beings could emerge in such groups. The deep, what he called libidinal forces of desire, are given up to the leader, while the aggressive instincts are unleashed on those outside the group. Freud wrote this.
Well, well, yes, we're a tournament species. So, yes, the leader that we see as a leader can get us hyped up to go kill the other people because this is what we're doing the whole time. There's never been a time when we're not doing this crap. Look at the freaking chimpanzees. They do it all the time. That's what they do. They go, one tribe grows in the area, they start to have conflict, and they'll go kill all the men and all the boys, rape all the women, and bring them all back. And this is the territory. This is you think we're above that? No, that's how we run, man. He discovered libidinal drives. What? No, it's tournament species survival games. This is not rocket science. This is not, he scientifically discovered some amazing thing. No, it's the same shit it's always been.
This is a warning, but the Nazis were deliberately encouraging these forces because they believed they could master and control them.
Well, all of them did. All of them thought they could. What are you talking about, dude? You don't think the Americans didn't do this stuff? Same stuff? The Russians didn't do it? Stop.
Well, Freud was saying that masses are bound by libidinal forces. They love each other and delegate their ideas and their feelings to the chap on top. What's the libidinal forces? What's the libidinal forces? Well, forces of love.
The libidinal forces of love. Okay, so they're traumatized. They're looking for someone to take all their problems away. The leader is doing the most common graft, the cult leader grift, which is to simplify everything down to us versus them. Let them know that you're out with me, we're together on this, and we're going to go against them, the other. And so libidinal force, what are you talking about? This is standard cult behavior. This is standard tournament species bullshit. This is what people are studying like it's some amazing breakthrough. Come on.
It's delegated to the others outside.
I guess it works on the masses. That's how it matters. Is people, the masses are so traumatized from being kicked around so much that they'll just believe whatever as long as somebody tells them, oh yeah, we're gonna take all your troubles away. Don't worry. As long as we get rid of those guys.
It's the mob.
I could see from afar, looking up Wilhelmstrasse towards Unter den Linden, how those 100,000 of people, when they passed Hitler, they just became completely delirious. They began to shout these cries I will never get out of my ears. Heil, Sieg, Heil. They demented.
I mean, have you been to a Taylor Swift concert? Have you been to any public event? Have you been to a wrestling match? No? Never heard of it? Okay. This is nothing special. People in crowds, they act like this. This is nothing. We always do. What are you talking about?
And here I got confirmation how those irrational forces, uncontrollable forces in Germany, in the Germans, had erupted, had broken out, were running wild.
Like what's her name? Like a concert, like a music concert. Really, guy? You think it was just Hitler? Really? That could just whip this people? You think it was just Goebbels? These people.
Depart, marching on.
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift says we will do it. Taylor Swift says vote Biden. We do it. These people are so nuts.
And in America too, democracy was under threat from the force of the angry mob. The effect of the stock market crash had been disastrous. There was growing violence.
Yeah, everybody lost their money, and they only supported a few banks that are part of the system, and everyone lost all their savings, and they still had to pay their mortgage. Yeah, it's gonna happen again. Watch.
An angry
keep your
population
money in
took
the
out their
banks. Keep your money in stocks. Keep your money in bonds. The Great Taking. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you might want to look it up.
On the corporations who were seen to have caused this disaster. Then, in 1932, a new president was elected, who was also going to use the power of the state to control the free market.
That's when Americans had nuts. Now we're just like, I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to write I'm going to read a mean email and say a mean tweet. Oh,
But his aim was not to destroy democracy, but to strengthen it. And to do this, he was going to develop a new way of dealing with the masses.
I am prepared, under my constitutional duty, to recommend the measures that a stricken nation in the midst of a stricken world may require. But in the event that the national emergency is still critical, I shall not evade the clear course of duty that will then confront me.
He just stole a bunch. He just stole the Americans' gold. He just stole Americans' wealth, and people was like, "I'm gonna quell the violence." He just stole from everybody. I don't know how people are still like pro-American after all this stuff. I didn't know any about any of this stuff until I was about 40, 35. Most of this kind of stuff. I had no idea how messed over we had been. I thought it was just me and my family. No, it's this whole so many people. It's so sad.
I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis. Broad executive power.
Here we go. It's the same stuff. It's never not the same stuff. People say, "Oh no, democracy and fascism are very different, very different." Yeah, the on paper, the ideology that you all study. If you look in the dictionary, it says blah, 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 and I don't know. You have to look at the actual, what actually happens. A small group of people control a technical class who can get shit done, but then control the masses. Nothing, doesn't matter what you label it, that's what it is.
It was the start of what would become known as the New Deal. Roosevelt assembled a group of young technocrats and planners in Washington. He told them that their job was to plan and run giant new industrial projects for the good of the nation.
Like Russia.
Roosevelt was convinced that the stock market crash had shown that laissez-faire capitalism
Germany.
could no longer run
What is the difference? It's the same stuff.
modern industrial economies. It had become the job of government. Big business was horrified, but the New Deal attracted the admiration of the Nazis, especially Joseph Goebbels.
They're all copying each other. They all ran out of ideas. They were like, no, we're not letting this freedom thing happen because that means we lose control and we let these people live free lives. That can't be done. We have to maximize profits. We need to mobilize these people. We need to extract value and then start fighting to gain more power. So we'll always have a permanent place at the top and never not be at the top.
Und wir sind aus der festen Überzeugung, dass Präsident Roosevelt und seine Berater auf dem richtigen Wege sind. Es handelt sich in der Tat um das größte wirtschaftliche und soziale Problem aller Zeiten. Die vielen Millionen Arbeitslosen, die ihre Plätze an den Maschinen und in den Kontoren
Just get their jobs back after they get stolen
haben,
all their
wieder an ihre
savings.
alten Arbeitsstellen zurückzuführen. Das kann nicht allein der privaten Initiative überlassen werden. Ausschlaggebend ist, dass die öffentliche Hand mit positiven
Even in
Maßnahmen
this
eingreift.
BBC thing, they still try and cover it up. Like there's
But although
some
Roosevelt, like the
amazing
Nazis,
thing.
was trying to organize society in a different
Not
way,
fooling me. You're not fooling me anymore.
unlike the
It's too late for me to do anything about it, but you're not fooling me anymore.
Nazis, he believed that human beings were rational and could be trusted to take an active part in government.
Yeah, a certain class that has a vested interest that you handpick and know from your fraternities and your colleges where you do your own indoctrination up there. Yeah, you can. There's certain people who get things done. Yes, and this guy, he knew how to staff people. No doubt. He did much better than job than in communist China. Communist Russia or in Nazi Germany. So I have to give it to him there. He didn't know how to hire people, but he completely destroyed America. There's no Bill of Rights. There's no Constitution. What are you talking about? Look, this guy wiped it out, man. That stuff's over. That ended with this guy. This guy put an end to it. So all that stuff people talk about, that stuff doesn't exist. What are you guys talking about? It's not a thing.
Roosevelt believed it was possible to explain his policies to ordinary Americans and take into account their opinions. To do this, he was helped by the new ideas of an American social scientist called George Gallup.
Favorite reading of New Deal Washington, the survey of U.S. public opinion.
See, okay, I worked for a Bloomberg company. I'm not going to say which one. But I worked for one of the tech companies doing polling software. So I when I first started the job, I was like, oh yeah, that's great. I didn't know much about how bad it got. I thought the tech company might have been outside the fray. Oh, no. So these polling companies, yeah, so there's a whole psychology about how you word the questions in order to create opinion. So this Gallup poll bullshit, it's not what you think it is. It's them. It's the results of how the people in the know. It's the results of how well are we able to program people.
From opposite of Princeton, New Jersey, a famed statistician,
So
Dr. George
bad.
Gallup tells
If people knew how bad it was, should be like gallows in the morning. But we're too wound up and just trying to survive to look at any of this stuff.
Washington from week to week what the nation is thinking. And in New York, Fortune magazine's analyst Elmo Roper compiles for publication a continuous record of the nation's approval or disapproval of how the country is being run.
Gallup and Roper rejected Bernays' view that human beings
That was just responding to the mind control, how well it's working. That's all it is.
Things were at the mercy of unconscious forces, and so needed to be controlled. Their system of opinion polling was based on the idea that people could be trusted to know what they wanted. They argued that one could measure and predict the opinions and behaviour of the public if one asked strictly factual questions and avoided manipulating their emotions.
Okay, so that was on the surface. I mean, it may have started out like that. That was like the selling point, but they soon discovered, no, that's not what they're doing.
Well, how about this one? Do you think Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal has been bad for the nation in general? No, that question's loaded. It automatically suggests an answer.
See, this is PR. This is the PR about what people think it should be, but it's not that at all.
Well, how about this? Is your present feeling toward President Roosevelt one of general approval or general disapproval? That's better.
See, they're very fair, very fair. These guys are experts. This is even a snow job. This whole show here is a snow job.
Scientific polling, the view of many people was that you couldn't trust public opinion. It was irrational, that it was ill-informed, chaotic, unruly, and so forth. And so that opinion should be dismissed. But with scientific polling, I think it established very clearly that people are rational, that they do make good decisions, and this offers democracy a chance to be truly informed by the public, giving everybody a voice in the way the country is run.
No, that's not how it works at all. These guys know it. This is bullshit. This is some propaganda shit right here.
I know my father wouldn't necessarily say the voice of the public is the voice of God, but he did feel very much that the voice of the people is a rational voice. And should...
Who is this politician? He's selling something right now. He's got the politician haircut and the things and who is this guy? He knows how to talk. He knows how to talk the sweet talk.
He heard.
What Roosevelt was doing was forging a new connection between the masses and politicians. No longer were they irrational consumers who were managed by sating their desires. Instead, they were sensible citizens who could take part in the governing of the country. In 1936, Roosevelt stood for re-election. He promised further control over big business. To the corporations, it was the beginning of a dictatorship.
Roosevelt interferes with private enterprise and is running the country into debt for generations to come. The way to get recovery is to let business alone.
But Roosevelt was...
No, it was over. When he got in power and all that stuff went through and there was no pushback, it was done. America was over. That's when it ended. That's when it ended. So we're on something else now. That's not. It's got a surface layer of veneer, of a very waxy veneer of American constitutional stuff. But if you scratch any part of it, it becomes something. You're like, what is that underneath it? There's something underneath here. It's moving. I can't really see what it is.
was triumphantly re-elected.
It looks, my friends, like a real landslide this time. So please let me thank you again and tell you that I hope to see you all very soon and bid you an affectionate good night.
Faced with this, business now decided to fight back, to regain power in America. At the heart of the battle would be Edward Bernays and the profession he had invented, public relations.
Following that election, business people start to get together and start to carry on discussions, primarily in private, and they start talking to each other about the need to sort of carry on ideological warfare against the New Deal and to sort of reassert the sort of connectedness between the idea of democracy on the one hand and the idea of privately owned business on the other. And so, under the umbrella of an organization which still...
Yeah, I don't know where that whole democracy, that whole thing's a head fake. It was a constitutional republic. It had democratic principles on parts of it, but it's not democracy. Democracy's always failed. And the fact they keep pushing this stuff just lets me know that this show, Censor Yourself from the BCCs, it's got propaganda all through it.
Exists, which is called the National Association of Manufacturers, and whose membership included all of the major corporations of the United States. A campaign is launched explicitly designed to create emotional attachments between the public and big business. It's Bernays' techniques being used on a grand scale. I mean, totally.
General Motors Parade of Progress, traveling the high roads and byroads of...
Yeah, I always wonder what these little trailers were when I would watch old movies and stuff. They would play these things like, what is this stuff? It's like very self-congratulatory. It's like, oh, they're trying to counter the New Deal. But they were doing back behind the scenes deals of all kinds of stuff. Everyone got paid, don't worry.
America, bringing to millions of Americans in their own hometown the fascinating story...
Except the common man, of course.
...behind modern industry.
That guy always gets screwed. Fuck that guy.
The campaign set out to show dramatically that it was business, not politicians, who had created modern America.
A better mode of living for all of us.
Bernays was an advisor to General Motors, but he was no longer alone. The industry he had founded now flourished as hundreds of public relations advisors organized a vast campaign.
Yeah, they learned the grift. Like, oh, this grift works. Just lie to people. Oh, yeah, we can do that. We don't have to do that. We'll call it lying. We'll call it accentuating certain aspects of reality. How's that? Okay.
They not only used advertisements and billboards, but managed to insinuate their message into the editorial pages of the newspapers.
They didn't tell anybody. They just did it. And nobody knew. Everybody thought this was organic. This is true. This is really great journalism, guys. Great journalism, guys.
It became a bitter fight. In response to
We have no idea what's been going on.
the campaign, the government made films that warned of the unscrupulous manipulation of the press by big business. And the central villain was the new figure of the public relations man.
They tried to achieve their ends by working entirely behind the scenes, corrupting and deceiving the public. The aims of such groups may be either good or bad, so far as the public interest is concerned, but their methods are a grave danger to democratic institutions.
The films also showed how the responsible
No, with the democratic bullshit. Stop.
citizen could monitor the press themselves. They could create a chart that analysed the reporting for signs of hidden
Fake news way back then.
bias. But such earnest instruction was
You leave a chart. You're gonna get to the bottom of it, huh? You're gonna figure out what these guys have really been talking about.
to be no match for the powerful imagination of Edward Bernays. He was about to help create a vision of the utopia that free market capitalism would build in America if it was unleashed. In 1939, New York hosted the World's Fair. Edward Bernays was a central advisor. He insisted that the theme be the link between democracy and American business. At the heart of the fair was a giant white dome that Bernays named Democracity.
Oh my god, dude.
And the central exhibit
They've been messing with us the whole, since way back then with this democracy baloney.
was a vast working model of America's future, constructed by the General Motors Corporation.
To my father, the World's Fair was an opportunity to keep the status quo.
Parts of American cities look like that.
Oh, that is capitalism in a democracy. Democracy and capitalism, that marriage. Like linking, just like that.
Fascism and progress, capitalism, fascism, capitalism. What is it? How can we keep this Ponzi scheme going?
He did that by manipulating people and getting them to think that you couldn't have real democracy in anything but a capitalist society, which was capable of doing anything, of creating these wonderful highways, of making, moving pictures inside everybody's house, of telephones that didn't need cords, of sleek roadsters. I mean, it was consumed.
Okay, we got all that, and everyone's more miserable than ever. So obviously, that wasn't the thing, right? That wasn't the thing, because we got all that, and it sucks.
Humorist, but at the same time, you inferred that in a funny way, democracy and capitalism went together.
The World's Fair was an extraordinary success and captured America's imagination. The vision it portrayed was of a new form of democracy, in which business responded to people's innermost desires in a way politicians could never do. But it was a form of democracy that depended on treating people not as active citizens as Roosevelt did, but as passive consumers. Because this, Bernays believed, was the key to control in a mass democracy.
It's not that the people are in charge, but that the people's desires are in charge. The people are not in charge. The people exercise no decision-making power within this.
Yeah, but who's giving them the desires?
So democracy is reduced from something which assumes an active citizenry to the idea of the public as passive consumers.
Oh.
Driven primarily by instinctual.
Oh, that's not sexual at all. Don't you dare.
Conscious desires, and that if you can in fact trigger those needs and desires, you can get what you want from them.
You mean lie to them? You mean cheat them? You can get stuff out of people by lying to them? Wow, tell me more, sir. Wow, that's really revolutionary. When you lie to people and tell them that don't tell the truth, you can get them to do things they wouldn't normally do? Wow, that's really breakthrough.
But this struggle between the two views of human beings as to whether they were rational or irrational was about to be dramatically
We're both. Stop.
affected by events in Europe. Events that would also change the fortunes of the Freud family. In March 1938, the Nazis annexed Austria. It was called the Anschluss. Hitler arrived in Vienna to an extraordinary outpouring of mass adulation. But even as he drove through the city, behind the scenes, the Nazis were systematically whipping up and unleashing the hatred of the crowd against the enemies of the new Greater Germany.
The Anschluss was a kind of explosion of terrible hatred against the enemies, the so-called enemies, or whatever they considered enemies, against the Jews totally, and also against a lot of...
And where did that come from? Just all of a sudden, overnight, all of a sudden, out of nowhere? They always make it seem like it just erupted out of nowhere. No. This stuff goes on for years and years and years in very cyclical patterns. Never just all of a sudden.
Of elitist Austrians who had opposed the Nazis in Austria. They said it's legitimate, now you can do what you want. So they did it. Stealing, robbing, and killing. I can't say it otherwise. And human depravity, of course, is always very near to normal behavior. It can change very quickly.
Yeah, because people have been manipulated. with this stuff. It's not just people just all of a sudden act irrationally. No, there's emotions have a rational basis. Emotions have an irrational basis. I don't know where people in the 60s and 70s thought emotions were irrational. No, there's a reason why people are emotional. You may not like it, you may not want to see the reason, you may not understand the reason, but there's always a reason. It may not be a good reason. It may not be the reason you think it should be.
As the violence and assassinations raged in Vienna, Freud decided he had to leave. His aim was to go to Britain, but he knew that Britain, like many countries, was refusing entry to most Jewish refugees. But help came from the leading psychoanalyst in Britain, Ernest Jones. He was in the same ice skating club as the Home Secretary, Sir Samuel Hoare, and Jones persuaded Hoare to issue Freud a British work permit. And in May 1938, Freud, his daughter Anna, and other members of his family set off for London.
Yeah, connections. Okay.
Freud arrived in London as Britain was preparing for war, and he settled with his daughter Anna in a house in Hampstead. But Freud's cancer was now far advanced, and in September 1939, just 3 weeks after the outbreak of war, he died. The Second World War would utterly transform the way governments saw democracy and the people they governed. Next week's programme will show how the American government, as a result of the war, became convinced there were savage, dangerous forces hidden inside all human beings.
They repeat that phrase a lot in this thing. Did you notice that? And they never go like to the bottom of like, hey, yeah, if you fuck with people, they're gonna act crazy.
Forces that needed to be controlled. The terrible evidence from the death camps seemed to show what happened when these forces were unleashed. And politicians and planners in post-war America would come to believe that hidden under the surface of their own population were the same dangerous forces. And they would turn to the Freud family to help control this enemy within.
This is always the excuse.
And ever adaptable, Edward Bernays would work not just for the American government, but the CIA.
Of course. You knew it was coming.
And Sigmund Freud's daughter Anna would also become powerful in the United States, because she believed that people could be taught to control the irrational forces within them. Out of this would come vast government programs to manage the inner psychological life of the masses.
But our society is totally normal, organic. It's totally, totally natural. All this stuff is the way it is because we can't figure out what's been going on.
The good thing about the American dream is that you can just go to sleep and try it all again the next night.